use it also. Okay, fine. Now let's move further. Now there is one more thing which comes in picture here. It is called as, okay, session state. You might have heard about this, right? Stateless, HTTP stateless, REST API are stateless in nature. REST standards, stateless in nature, means every request should be considered independently. Now, with regards to security also, something like state management concept is there. State management concept is there. And we have to make sure we are setting up stateless for our configuration. How you can do that? It's just a simple configuration here. By setting up value like this. So we can simply set up a value like this, Control-Shift-O. Just see. We are simply specifying that every request you consider stateless. Means don't try to maintain state between previous request and the new request. Everything should be considered fresh, and this should be your configuration for REST APIs. Okay. For REST APIs, we have to set up stateless. Okay. Let's try to understand this more with certain experiments. Okay. Let's see, currently we are here. Okay, Spring application came up. It gave us some value. Let's try to understand state more clearly. We come here. Let's go to our post request. And here we are providing a valid value. Okay. Fine. You made a request. Now, if you don't pass, so it is not considering, right? So this is a new request. It is checked, and it did not consider okay, previous request was authenticated. So next request also I should process. No, every request is a fresh request. Proper validation has happened, and it is giving the response. If you do basic auth back again and pass something else, again, every request is considered like a fresh request. And if you pass correct details, it is working. Okay, fine. Now, there are multiple states here. Let's say there is another value here called as always. How does this work? Many times we just know what is state. We don't practically understand state. So now let's try to understand what happens. We change the value to something like always. We got a new password. Okay. Notice here, first of all, when you try to call it based upon old password, it is unauthorized because the current password is something else. So you pass the correct password here. Okay, go. Okay, it is working. You call it once more, it is working. So far, so good. But now, let's try to experiment here if we can. No auth, we are not passing it. Try to call. Still it is working. What is happening? State is maintained in the backend. Some linking has happened between previous request and the new request coming from this guy. Let's say, for example, if you pass again basic auth with a different value, okay, at least now it is able to check that. So at least if the value is passed, okay, it needs a correct value. So that is good. If the value is passed, at least it is looking for correct value. But if in case it is not passed, it is still allowing. So what is happening? Behind the screen, state management has happened. So we don't want this kind of behavior. REST API strictly says every request has to be self-sufficient and independent. Don't try to link between first and the second. During security also, we have to stand with the same principle. Okay, so we can do some experiments like this. So you can play around with this experiment. If we set up like below, then if first request is authenticated, then for second request, even if we don't pass basic auth, still working. What does it mean? Behind the screen, it's doing state management. Behind the screen, it's doing state management. Means whatever authentication came for the previous request, same is considered for next request also. That is what is happening here. So we don't want this kind of behavior. We want that every time it has to be stateless. How exactly it maps between the first and the second request? This is also very interesting. Let's try to check it out here. Okay, let's try to check it out. If you pass this basic auth, okay, I'm copying this password just for copy sake. The mechanism here happens something like this. When we make the API, guys, listen this part very carefully. A lot of people don't get this. So when we make the API call, the behind the screen session management is going to happen at the server side. Server is going to generate, okay, something called as a J session ID. So when we make the API request, server is going to validate. It will generate something called as J session ID, and in response to the first request, as a cookie, this J session ID is going to be returned back. Now, what Postman does by default, when you are sending the second request, even not passing the auth here, in the header, it by default sends that as the cookie, the J session ID which you got. Based upon that, server realizes, oh, this was my previous generated, it is linked to which session, I should consider that, and accordingly it is able to validate. Guys, are you getting how it is implemented behind the screen? So it maintains the session. It gives a unique J session ID for that session and returns in the response. When you are passing it for the second time, okay, it is in a always state. So it will pass, the Postman is passing the cookie J session ID. Server Spring Boot security is reading that J session ID and then seeing that, oh, stateless, like always state is there. It's not stateless. Means I can reuse the state. Then using the ID, it goes, gets the authentication, which was happened for the previous request, and then it processes it. So this communication has made a second request, even without the value, is also able to serve the response. Okay, guys, did you get this? Interesting, right? So J session ID they created, they passed it in response, Postman in cookie request, it gave back, and then server is maintaining state. It sees this cookie is for which previously authenticated request, and then it starts processing. Guys, are you getting this? Guys, are you getting this? Give a quick confirmation. Pallavi gets it. Surendra gets it. Sanjay is getting it. So there is a communication, just be aware. During interview, any discussion, if they do, try to produce like this. Okay, can you explain statefulness? Okay, or during this itself interview, they say, oh, REST API or stateless API. Can you explain what that means? You can say, oh, while we were experimenting this security concept, there we practically work with stateful and stateless nature. And then you can explain with this scenario, they will like your understanding. And then explain the reasoning. Okay, J session ID comes in the cookie. When you are passing it back again, it can read it, look for the previous session, and just reuse the authentication which was already there. That's the explanation. And majority of the job seekers are not able to clearly tell all these things. Even experienced people, they don't missed it in the junior level. Okay? Again, 1-2 years of experience. If you get exposure on these systems, then you can confidently say, but what if you're not doing it, so you don't gain the knowledge as an experienced guy also. That is where work on good projects where you're getting responsibility, then you will learn actually really good. Not every project gives good learning. Please be aware of that. Okay? So try to get into good projects. If not learning, then talk to your manager how to make more valuable learning. Or if nothing is going on, talk to the manager and HR to switch the project. If nothing is going on, leave the company, do job hunting. Like first do job hunting, get another offer, then leave the company. Okay, many times we are saying this. People like juniors are not like a lot of beginners, 2 3 years of experience messing it up. First they resign, and then they are like, now we will do job hunting. That approach does not work. Working professional also needs 3 to 4 months, sometimes more, to get next opportunity. Okay, so always first do the job hunting. Don't share it with anyone in the team. Do the job hunting, get an offer letter with proper joining date, then you officially resign. Once you have resigned, you have notice period of 2 3 months depending upon your company. In the notice period, you again continue the job hunting to get other offers from the market, and then you make a best decision which is the right company for you to join, and then you join that company. Remaining companies, you tell upfront, okay, we are not going to come. Don't give last moment surprises to them also. So follow this approach. Many people might say, but are we like, why are we doing this to companies? Dekho guys, it's a practical world. You are not going to change job every 6 months. You will change maybe every 2 3 years. So for 2 3 years, if you can get a better project, better pay, you should definitely give that. It's not about trust and loyalty. It's about the practical decision. So when company needs you, they pay you good. If company is not having a good market, they terminate you. So company is practical. We have to respect that also. Likewise, when you are switching for the job, why not look for the best option for you? To become great, knowledgeable, look for the best option, because for next 2 3 years, you will stay in that company. So evaluate multiple offers, make a decision, and clearly tell the other people, unfortunately, I'm not able to join, upfront itself, not on the last day. So if you do that, it's a good decision for you, and company will anyway survive. So do things practically. Good for you, good for the company also. Okay. Okay, fine. Now let's move forward. A lot of people don't do all these things, and simple things cause problems. Okay, so we experimented with stateful nature. Okay, now we can do this one more experiment here. This header is passing the cookie back and back again, right? So let's say in Postman, there is a cookie kind of option here. Okay, in that, just see localhost on our server, JSession ID cookie. If we remove this cookie, okay, don't pass it. So if you don't give the cookie, so automatically server does not map it to anything. So server basically says, oh, there is nothing to map. What do I map this request to? So accordingly, so just be aware. So we will need again to pass this. So then server will again authenticate the object, start maintaining session. And now let's try to not pass it. It is maintaining it again. But point is, we don't want this kind of a behavior. We want all our APIs to always be stateless in nature. Otherwise, confusion might happen. Okay. And that is really a very scary situation. Okay, without checks, you are allowing APIs to access your system. There could be a lot of breaches here. What if some password got changed in the backend and still old password people are able to access for some time? Don't do that. Reset it, every request fresh, validate, use. Keep it very simple. System will be safe. So we need to set up stateless mechanism here. So that is what is this experiment about. Okay. So when you do stateless, so every request will be considered, even if cookie communication on all matters or not, does not matter. Server at the backend will always use a new one itself, even if it is cookies are being communicated. That does not matter. Okay. So every time, if you don't pass it, server is stateless in nature. It does not try to map it with the earlier one, and it does the dealing accordingly. Okay. So just check. Even though in the header JSession ID is passed, but still server don't care about that because it is stateless in nature. Okay. It is stateless in nature. Okay, chalo, that topic is done. Let's move to the next one. Maybe we can take a quick note about it. Set the API status as stateless. So you need to use something like stateless. So every request is considered independent. So for working with REST API, these two configurations we want to take in production also. CSRF we want to disable, Second, this also is required. Point is, depending upon what security mechanism you want, you have to decide which algorithm to use. Currently, for experimenting, we use this one. And we are saying every request is authenticated. If you want to make decision, some requests authenticate, some don't authenticate, get post kind of pattern-based matching, you can play around. Like this object is there. I will just paste this object in our notepad note also, so you can experiment with this. Okay, fine. Now, what's the next topic? We don't need basic auth. It is there only for experimenting purpose. So next point is we will remove the basic auth. Okay, remove basic auth since we don't want it. So we will simply delete the value. Okay, fine, save it. Okay, even if now new password is coming, we have removed the basic auth dependency from the system. Let's try to pass it. It should not really trigger. Okay, it's not working. So we remove the basic auth. So server is not considering that as the authentication mechanism, and it is not even allowing forward because server does not know then what to authenticate with. So we are saying, okay, authenticate the request. Then we are not telling the Spring framework how to authenticate the request. So automatically Spring is saying, okay, no entry. So we did a mess here, right? Here we are saying request should be authenticated, but Spring does not know how to authenticate it. So automatically Spring is just blocking everything back again. So even if you go here, you try to reach out back. So this is also stopped. Everything is stopped. Okay. Okay. Let's move forward. So once it is all stopped, just notice here, this logs may that username password is basic auto configuration is still working. Okay. Still it is generating that. Since we don't want to use basic auth, why to even have that kind of approach? So we can simply remove it. So for that also there is a configuration in place. You can remove that configuration by doing like this. Just tell to the Spring, don't auto configure this class, user detail service auto configuration. So we can exclude auto configuration something by using this syntax. So whichever is the starting application of Spring, there we can simply define like this. You can exclude certain auto configurations. Okay, we don't want Spring to really auto configure this related whatever beans are available there. So once we say that, let's save it. Okay, so just see exclusion section is being printed, okay, where this is now going to be excluded. And once it is excluded, just look here, you don't see that password being generated. So accordingly, we will be acting because basic auth we are anyways not using into our system. Okay, so fine. So just be aware, this is the next configuration. We will be removing it. Okay, fine. Now comes our project requirement. What do we want to do? We want to start with HMAC authentication logic. Yesterday, we have already written the authentication mechanism of HMAC. Now the question is how to plug that into the security filters. The HMAC logic we know already. Yesterday that was done. But our aim is how to plug HMAC check in Spring security. That's our target. The approach is very simple. Approach is very simple. We already can think about approach. We have these kind of filters currently being executed. Every request we make, 15 filters are passed by Spring, and then something is going on. What we need to do is, we need to create our own filter. Okay. In the flow, you will be creating one more filter, nothing but a HMAC filter. So this we will create a HMAC filter and we will plug it into this flow. Okay. So what will happen? So whenever this flow of filters is happening, somewhere we have to plug in our HMAC also. And then we have to decide if everything is proper, go further, otherwise do some exception related work. Okay, so in the HMAC filter, HMAC logic is going to be available. So this is our next aim. Run the HMAC SHA 256 logic. Okay, lot of things will come in picture now one by one when we start coding. So please keep your full attention. Okay, so guys, can we start with the second part? Plugging in our HMAC into the Spring security. Guys, can we start? Hello, everybody. Are you there? Can we start? Okay. Priyanshu, Rishali. Yesterday, whatever we coded, now we need to plug it into the Spring framework. Lot of new things will come. One by one, we will build. Okay. Hello, guys. Let's get started. Thanks for confirming. Let's go, guys. So we need to create our own filter. That is the step number one. Okay. Then we need to decide how to add this filter inside the Spring flow. And then we have to make sure okay, we are authenticating the request. Okay. So let's go through it one by one. First, the documentation is very good and very clear. It gives you a lot of guidance here. Just see, they have given some methods. Adding a filter to the filter chain. So if you want to add some filters to the filter chain, so this is the filter chain. If you want to add some filter, Spring has given some methods. Add filter before, add filter after, add filter at. So we can somehow pass it. Some methods are there. Okay, next. Now just see. If you have written your own custom filter, nothing but we need to write our own custom filter for HMAC. So if you want to write our own custom filter and add our own custom filter, what they are saying is, okay, recommendation from Spring is something like this. If your custom filter is of the nature authentication, then place it after logout filter. Nothing but please note that whenever we try to call this API, okay, whenever we try to call this API, it is running through a lot of filters behind the screen. Okay, just see, it is running through a lot of filters. Here there is one logout filter also. What Spring is directly telling us, कि whenever you want कि your custom filter is of authentication nature, try to position it after the logout filter. So our positioning is clear. Okay, we need to do something like this. Add filter after. And then here we have to specify, okay, after which filter, logout filter. Nothing but just understand, guys, it is a chain. So chain may 1, 2, 3, 4 will be there. So somewhere in the chain, logout filter is going to be available. So this is Spring recommendation itself. So logout filter is a built-in filter given by the Spring related system. And Spring is recommending if your custom filter deals with authentication, and yes, HMAC is about authentication part itself. So better to position it after logout. So we have to use something like this, add filter after, then somehow give our filter and then say logout. So this is how we can use it. And if you're dealing with authorization, then you can put it after anonymous authentication filter. So something things are available. Okay, fine. Next, how to create your own filter. So basically we need to answer two things. First, how to create your custom HMAC filter. Point number 2, where to position in chain, where and how. So this second point is clear. Logout may and method also we are clear. How to create, we are not clear. So one of the way Spring has given, okay, if you want to create a custom filter, one approach is you can implement filter. It will give you some kind of over method which you can override, write certain business logic depending upon whatever you want. And if everything is okay, just notice here, guys, if everything is okay in your business logic, just call the next filter in the line. At the beginning of today's session, we said, right? Key, yeah, if everything is okay, you need to call to the next filter in the line. Then only the flow continues. If there is any problem, one of the suggestion which here is happening is throw an exception and the process will terminate, then it will not go further. So this is one simple example which they provided. Okay, so how do you create custom filter? One way is implement filter. Okay, so in interview they might discuss, okay, fine, you did the filter, you customize, how can you do it? Okay, approach number one is implementing filter. But there is a different recommendation from the Spring guys also. If you scroll here only, you will find it. Instead of implementing filter, you can extend from one per request filter, which is the base class for filters that are only invoked once per request. Okay, so nothing but our nature is also one per request only, right? Every time a request comes, only one time we need to call our filter, not n number of times HMAC. So one time only required. So a better handling we can do by extending this one. So there are two ways. Okay, one way is this is more generic in nature. Another way is extending from one plus per request filter. It is inside the Spring itself, and then accordingly writing the business logic. So our use case is this one. So we will be creating a filter by extending one per request filter. Okay, draw these conclusions very properly. We need a filter, otherwise we cannot take the advantage of Spring security, because all rules are in filters. Then comes the question, how to build filters? Okay, two options are there. Then that's what we have to read documentation and understand in our project what is applicable. So we need to do like this. Okay, let's create some kind of class then for filter purpose. Okay, we will say something like this: new class HMAC SHA 256, or okay, HMAC SHA 256 filter. Put it as part of .security package. So anything you can say, I want to put it under filter package. Okay, fine. So, but don't mix it along with all the other service layer business logic, because this is a layer which is happening before even you reach to the service, and these are classes have a special behavior which is not mixed with your rest of the functionality. So better to put it into a different layer before your actual regular application. So security sounds like a good place since we are dealing with security. Okay, fine. And it should extend one per request filter. So what I will do is, it should super class should be this one. Okay, 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 created. Now let's make it logging. Fine. So in this class, they might have an abstract method which we are overriding here, and accordingly they provided us some options. HTTP servlet request in web related programming, you might have directly worked with HTTP servlet request, HTTP servlet response. Okay, in servlet based applications. Right now all this thing was hidden from us because we are directly working with the controller and the business logic. But when you deal with filters, you're actually talking still with much more internal systems of the framework, where they are directly working with the libraries of servlet based application itself. So HTTP servlet request, HTTP servlet response we are supposed to work with, and there is something called as filter chain. Okay, for now don't worry about any business logic here. Can we just put currently like this? Okay, can we currently just put like this? We have created a filter. For now we will just create the chain with no business logic. We will just make sure our filter gets executed in the process. That's it. We will not care about any business logic. Our step number one will be, again, thinking logically and coding incrementally. So we will add a filter. We will make it just work without any business logic. That will be our first state to achieve. Okay, create filter and just make it execute for incoming request. We are just trying to hit that. Fine, for that we have already created a filter. Now it should chain. How do we chain it? Already this documentation is giving us an example. If you want to chain, you just call this. So we will simply be putting some loggers here, log.info, then chain, and log.info again, that finished processing. Okay, so that's it. No other business logic here. The business logic, we need to plug in our yesterday's logic here. Okay, call the signature verification and then see whether it is true, false, and then decide whether to throw an exception or not to throw an exception. But for now, we can say, fine, the chain is created. So step number one is done. Okay, we have created a filter and made it part of the chain when we have done this step here. Okay, so with this simple method, okay, we created filter and made it a chain. But is the filter called so far? No, we have not given this filter to our security configuration. We need to hand over our filter to this guy, right? Spring Security. Then only, once it is part of the filter chain, then only it can go inside. So what does it mean? Currently we created HMAC filter, but it is not added. So currently HMAC filter is there outside here. It's not part of this flow. This is the current step. HMAC filter is currently outside. We have written the code that if it is invoked, it should call the next. But by nature, we have not yet plugged it into the chain. The chain is still moving here only. Okay. Now, how to plug in? Some time ago itself, we realized for plugging into the flow, we need to call these kind of methods. We need to call this kind of methods. Now, if you check it out here, they have given that example here. Notice, in the security filter chain setup, we already know that, oh, HTTP request and then bunch of methods we need to call and finally say build. In that method somewhere, we need to specify add filter after. Then we need to specify the object of our new filter. And then we need to specify, okay, add filter after, okay, which filter we want to add. So in order to add it to the chain, we need to update the security filter chain logic by doing like this. So we need to go here, and here in the logic, we can specify like this, but it is not supposed to be with colon. Care about the syntax. Next, our filter name is what? So let's customize it. Our filter name is this one. Next, we are supposed to position it after which filter? We are dealing with authentication here. So the recommendation is we need to put it after logout filter. So we need to put it after logout filter and do a import. And yes, it is imported. So what did we tell? Okay, we added our filter after the logout filter and by creating an object of this class. First, let's see whether this is running. Then we will discuss more about the next point. Okay, so the chain is created. Everything is saved. There is no compilation problem. Service is started also, and it's all okay. Let me just save one more time so it restarts once more. Okay, everything is good. Let's just call. We have done some logging also. So we will just call from Postman regular flow. Okay, fine, it is forbidden, all that is okay. But main thing is our filter invoked? That is what is our main question. Okay, let's see. Yes, notice. First, it invoked logout filter. After that, it is invoking HMAC filter. So 5th and 6th. Okay, guys, now look at the interesting part here. So filter is called. That's the first conclusion. Okay, HMAC SHA 256 filter is invoked. In order to do that invocation, we have used this kind of line. The filter is called, we are able to test it. But notice here, in our filter, what have we written? First, we are printing one statement. After that, we are printing one statement. Now, let's look at the flow here, what is going on. First, it has printed this statement. Then it went to the next filter because we have written our code in that manner. Okay, do the chain. So it went through the next filter in the chain. And then that further called 8, 9, 10. Okay. And then some session manager created a null authentication. Then it further went to remaining 11th and 12th. And then authorization tried to check whether this request is valid request or not, and said no, access is denied. Because we have not plugged in security properly so far. We just added a filter, but we need to add a proper business logic. So that is not there. Accordingly, it has thrown exception because it made a decision, like we discussed in the beginning. When the final flow has happened, it made a decision, okay, hey, you guys are not doing it properly, and I am supposed to now block your request. So it went here, it tried to again deal with authentication, and then it tried to make a decision, should I pass it success, should I give a failure? It decided failure because we have not played with these systems properly. So that is where we are here. But important thing, it is called. That is the first conclusion. Next, observe another thing. Once this is done, okay, initial statement is processing the request. It runs, this big exception is printed, and notice here, we get another logger which says finish processing the request. So what happened? After all that exception was thrown, now return journey is also going on. Okay. After all that, now return journey is also going on. And notice, while the return journey is happening, internally it is trying to map it somewhere to error. Okay. Maybe for front-end based application, some default error nature could be there. So whenever that is also an error is an endpoint, so it shows that, okay, we need to do this, all the filter executions again. But notice, even if it says invoking HMAC, it does not print. So it does not call us 2 times. Okay, so just be aware. That's further continuation of what happens in the framework. But just be aware, there is further more processing which keeps happening. But for now, we are clear that our filter is called and it is printing the values. And this is how it's in the chain. Guys, are you clear with this? How to create the filter, how to plug it into the flow. Is these 2 things clear, guys? Okay, Priyanshu, Surender, Karthik, good. So creation is done, plugging this is done. Now comes the rest of the business logic. Let's assume, let's do some assumptions here. We are just coding logically, guys. Okay. Before we touch the further code, I want to discuss one more point with you. It is interesting and important. In the documentation, somewhere they have mentioned it. Let's see. Okay. Notice. We have created our object using a new operator, not making this a Spring Bean. Okay. Observe that part. That was intentional. Why it is intentional? Let's try to understand that. The documentation says, okay, if you want to define your filter as a bean, okay, you can do it, but there is a risk involved. Notice this. When you declare a filter as a Spring Bean, either by annotating with @component annotation or declaring it in your bean @bean annotation. So if you make your class as a, if you make your filter as a Spring Bean, Spring Boot automatically registers it with the embedded container. So Spring is going to inject it by default. This may cause the filter to be invoked 2 times. So one time Spring is also trying to inject, and in your security chain, you are also trying to position. If 2 times it tries to happen, there is a risk involved here. Okay. Now they are giving you some guidance, okay, how to avoid execution 2 times, but better to avoid this kind of a concept. Okay. So why? Because it's not going to be performance wise bad even if we use a new operator here. Why? Because on startup of the microservice, when this method is called, this method is going to be called only one time. So it's not like for every request, it is creating a new object. So we don't lose by performance, because this is a spring bean. This is going to create like a spring bean. One object will be created. And when that object is created, you are using a new operator. So it's not like for every request, there is a new object. So you don't lose that power of efficiency. Still, for every time, there is just one object and you use it, because this one object itself is part of this chain as well. Okay? But be aware, if you are planning to use somehow at the rate service here or component here, so there are some risk involved. Spring might try to register it as a bean to the filter chain, and you are also doing it. Some ordering, this, that, confusion might come. So better recommendation is, don't go for it. Let's have it like this itself. Okay? So that will be my suggestion for you as well. Try to avoid making filters spring bean. Rather, put in filter chain as new object. Okay? Okay, fine. So that part is clear. Now next, let's try to think. Currently, why or how to make our request pass successfully to the controller? That's the next problem that we want to solve. We added a filter. Now, we want the request to be valid and then pass to controller. So nothing but actual abhi logic mein we are getting in. So how we can do? Dekho, first of all, HMAC filter. Let's say here you will write whatever your business logic of HMAC of yesterday. So for now, we are not trying to plug that, because we already learned it. It's just a method call. So let's not get there. So here we can put a to do, include HMAC SHA 256 service call here. But just imagine, finally you make that service call, and let's say you get a Boolean is valid equal to true. Okay? You got a Boolean request. Because in the end, whatever logic you run, finally there will be a decision maker for you, okay, whether the request is valid or not. So let's assume the request is valid and then try to code based upon that, because doing this part is easy. We spent 3 hours yesterday doing that code, but doing this, how to make Spring security realize that the request is valid, that we still don't know. So we need to take care of that. But the flow is going to be something like this. If it is valid, then only call the next filter, right? If is valid is true, then only we are supposed to call the next filter. Else, it is going to be an exception. From where did we get this knowledge? Looking at Spring documentation itself. If it has access, nothing but it has value, then we are supposed to call this and even run a return statement. Very good. So you call that and run a return statement. If you don't run a return statement, it will continue here and maybe throw an exception also here. So this is important. So with documentation, we can learn. So you will plug in whatever logic for HMAC security. And finally, you will have a decision whether it is true or false. If it is true, means if the request is valid, then you will call the chain. Else, if it is not valid, you are basically going to throw exception. Here put mandatory. This return is important. Otherwise, it will get into issues. So throwing exception right now, let's just look right like this. Error handling, we need to completely think about how do we do in case of filter. That will be a different topic in itself. But currently, we will just reuse the code which Spring documentation itself is guiding us. Okay. This is what flow looks like. Let's put a logger here. Okay, it is something past, and then you go and then you call. So this will be our next improvement. Okay, somehow we will know that it is valid, then we will call the next, and then otherwise not. Okay, so let's try to see what happens this time. So we go here. Okay, Still, it is not going to controller. That is fine. But we want to see what is going on. Let's go to the logs. Let's try to understand. Okay, after logout filter, HMAC SHA filter came. Next, it printed this statement, HMAC validation passed this. After that, it went to the filter chain. So remaining filters in the chain were executed. It went to some internal session and added a null authentication again. So we are not dealing with anything with regards to authentication. That is one issue now. We are not dealing with authentication. This guy is putting some null authentication. And then it further goes. It reaches to the authorization framework. And after authorization framework, it is making a decision, key access is denied, and it is throwing an exception. And we know that after authorization flow, it does this kind of a drama. It tries to get authentication object from Spring or security context holder. And using that, it tries to make a decision whether to allow or not. Currently, for our HMAC related logic, we did not touch these two objects. And that is where some default behavior is happening and there are problems. So that means if we want Spring Security to realize that our request is a valid request, we need to work with these two objects. Because in the end, they are using that for checking. So what is going to be our next requirement? How to tell Spring Security that current request is authenticated? That's our next question. How to tell Spring Security that current request is authenticated? Okay, we know that it is authenticated because here you have made a check, is valid. So you know that it is authenticated. Here we know request is authenticated. But the point is, Spring does not know it. So we need to tell to the Spring. We need to inform Spring Security that request is authenticated. Otherwise, there is going to be an issue. Now comes the question, how to tell Spring that request is authenticated? And for that, it comes down to talking in terms of technical language. Spring understands, framework understands programming. Framework is saying, if you want to tell to framework that request is authenticated, we need to work with these two objects because framework is using these objects to make it a decision whether it is valid or not. Okay, so that is going to be our understanding. To inform Spring Security that request is valid, we need to work with these two objects, security context holder and authentication. Now, how to work with these objects? Everything is interesting. How to work with these objects? Okay, one simple approach is there in the Spring documentation itself. In the Spring documentation, they have given a kind of a structure of what these objects look like. Let's look at that one. Okay, let's look at this one. Yes, this is how the security context holder looks like. Security context holder object internally has reference to security context object, which internally has reference to authentication object. So when you look at this diagram, you understand somehow inside security context holder, authentication object is available. It's nothing but they have created Java classes in that manner. Okay, so one class having a reference variable to the another class, that having the reference variable to authentication class, and inside authentication class, they have something which identifies which user it is, username, password, and what role access he has. Whether it is a valid user, invalid user, something like that. Role, whether it is merchant user or regular user or CEO user or an employer user, the role is there. Currently, even though we are not using role, but yeah, that option is available. The framework supports details about user, username, password, and then comes the role of that user also. The framework has given that provision. But know that we need to work with these objects. In order to work with the object, they have given example also. Notice, how do you work with this object? Step number 1, security context holder dot create empty context. If you call this, you will be getting this security context object. So first line is going to create top object, say security context object will be coming. Okay. Next, for authentication, for testing purpose, they have given one testing authentication token. The name of the class is like that. So we can currently test with this, but for going to production, should we use the same thing or something else? We will discuss that. But in order to create this authentication object, you can simply create it like this and just see what we are doing. Context dot set authentication. Nothing but first, from security context holder, we called some method, created Spring security context there. In the security context, we have set up a object of authentication. Nothing but this is created. By these lines, it is created. And then what do we do? Inside security context holder, we again do set context of the context which was created. Nothing but, guys, it's just objects. One object you're trying to set into another object. So this is not any brain required here. It's just object setting. You create one object, inside that you put this, and you're just assigning the objects properly. But basically, this is the structure. Please be aware of this. Let's take a screenshot. So we need to create these kind of objects. By that way, we will be able to say that this request is authenticated. And then when Spring is running, Spring is going to read this authentication object which we are creating. And then Spring will understand, oh, this request looks like a valid. Then Spring will make a decision. Let me continue normal flow to the controller. So we need to feed what Spring is looking for. It's looking for this, we will give it that. So let's put an image here. You need to learn to read the documentation, guys. Okay, as a beginner, you might find it a bit messy, but if you spend more time, documentation is where a lot of clarity will come. You will understand the concepts, you will understand things properly. So you have to develop the patience to read from the document and self-understand. Every time depending on somebody help me is not going to work out in your IT career. You need to figure out things by yourself, by using AI, by using your mind, by using documentation, by using YouTube videos, by using some courses, by reading multiple blogs, and then finalizing your understanding by experimenting with it. And that is actual experience. So you have to do very deep work. It doesn't come easily to understand all these things. But anyways, okay, try to gain there. And I think Spring Security and this documentation is an amazing place to familiarize yourself how to scan through documents. Okay. Fine. So we need to create this. How to create? Already example is here only. We will simply copy this piece of code, go back, and here we will be putting it. Before we pass to the rest of the chain, we need to inform it. Why before? Array, logs may we are seeing, right? Authorization will hit if you don't inform it before. So you need to think clearly. Where is the authentication object? There are so many authentication objects. But anyways, we need Spring Security Core.authentication. Yeah, this one. Spring Security Core.authentication. Whenever confusion about package is coming, go to internet, ask it, and feed the right packages. Don't import wrongly, unnecessary time waste. Okay, so what did we do? We created a context. We created a temporary authentication object with some details, and we have set it up. We have give it in the context also. So the theory says this object is assigned in security context holder. Theoretically, we have done that. No, this we have done practically. Theoretically, our assumption is when Spring is going to run authorization, it will read the value which we have set. So here we are setting it. Context holder dot set context, we are setting this. So we did that. Now, theoretical understanding is when it runs this, it should read the security context folder and get the authentication object which we have set here, saying yes, it is authenticated with this user roles, username and roles, and then it should be able to make a decision that, okay, I want to make it a success. Let's see whether it is able to do that right now. Okay, so everything is saved. Let's restart the system once. Okay, it's time to test the flow. Basic auth and all, nothing is required now. It's not going to deal with any of this. So let's just call this. It worked, right? Let's just call post API. It worked. We are able to pass through filters. We are able to coordinate with the Spring security layer in between, and we are then able to reach out to the controller. It's as if you're going to an airport, there is full security and everything. We are able to pass through all that successfully, and now we have access to the boarding area. So all that we pass through the framework. Guys, are we clear with this? Okay, team, are we clear with this? We pass through the security framework and reach to the controller, now access to the business logic world which we are developing. So much of security, and then we go to the actual functionality. Then comes whatever we have built in the past 6 weeks of time, 5 weeks of time, controller, this, that, business logic, database persistency, making another API call. But you have to pass through this gate of security. We were able to do that everything properly right now. Okay? Okay, awesome. Let's do one thing. I will just put this code reference also. Okay, maybe this entire class, I will just put this class, right? It's not done. It's not full final. Lot of gaps are there in the flow. We need to still finish it, but we have reached to one point. Okay, so this much code we can definitely place here. Okay, now what happens? This authentication token is for testing purpose. Generally, production, we don't go with this. Then what is the solution? We are expected to create our own authentication object here. That's the expectation. Okay, we will try to build it. So let's give this instruction to ChatGPT. Okay, let's give this instruction to ChatGPT. We will say we have reference to below code. However, our logic is for every incoming request, we need to validate HMAC SHA 256. If the request is valid, then we need to create an authentication object and keep in security context. Okay, what is the most suitable production ready way to meet for our project? Let's see. Authentication filter, authentication manager, and then HMAC authentication provider. It is saying HMAC authentication provider. Just look here. Guys, it is creating a custom token for ourselves. So create a custom token. HMAC authentication token. We need to create our own token which extends abstract authentication token. So maybe inside library somewhere they have already something called as abstract authentication token. For that, we need to create our own token, set some values, inside that one. Okay. And yeah, that's it. And I think furthermore, it is saying you can go to the provider and work with the provider. So now all this is like further, if you want to build more providers and all, you can refer to this full kind of code. But otherwise, we can simply just create our own custom token. That's the main point here. Don't use what default token is available, rather create your own custom token. So let's try to do that. So instead of using this testing authentication token, we will like to create our own custom token and with some username password, and then let's see how we can get it back. Okay. So we will create our own token. Side security, config security, and then, okay, just a second, guys. Okay. So guys, what is our learning here? We are not supposed to use testing token. Better recommended wala is use your own token. Okay. So we will use our own token. Already some code reference is given. If it doesn't work, then we will try to change it. But username, password, and role, these kind of three things can be applicable. Let's see what is there inside this testing token. So based upon the role, it is creating this kind of an object. Notice authorities util dot create authority list, and then you are passing something there. Maybe we will try to play around something like this. Okay. And testing token is also implementing abstract authentication token itself. So we can create our own token here, which matches to our situation. Right click new class, HMAC token, and let's put this kind of a class. Okay. Control Shift O. It is expecting some, I think, java.util.collection. Yeah, it is expecting some java.util.collection somewhere here, maybe this wala. Okay. So this is one object where you can, this becomes your username, this becomes your password. So it is somehow saying, okay, let's put the signature inside the request. We don't have anything called as API key. So basically, expectation was username and password we are supposed to use. Okay. So we will change these naming to user name, and maybe signature we can pass if we want to. Okay, if we want, we can pass the signature here. So username and the corresponding signature. Fine, let's put that. So inside API key, also we will rename it as username. Okay. So if you call the only the first method, it is saying set authentication as false. So we are not supposed to call the first method then. Okay, we are supposed to call this wala, set authenticated as true, because we have to set up authentication also. Credential is done, principal is done. Okay, so somewhere we are supposed to call this one. What we can change in the code? We can, okay, here grant authorities is created like this. Let's try to learn from this example how this grant authority is created by this guy. We can do looks like something like this. So notice Okay. Mm-hmm. Can this line come here and then move here? No, it has to be the first one. Okay. If you don't pass this, it's getting into problems. Huh? Super of null. And then, okay, so that means while calling this at the invoker side, we can create something like this. Okay, while calling at invoker, we can create something like this. So username, signature, and then we can just create some kind of role and pass it inside the system. Okay, and then this is going to go like this. So basically, we are not supposed to use this method. Or can we just try it in this manner? Just I am trying out, okay, what will be a better way of using here. Okay, yeah, here we can say string role and then take the role here. So it is going to create grant authority, which we are passing it to the super. Then username and the password is there. And after that set authentication, we will set it up as true. So we are creating a simple method signature. We don't need this kind of a constructor then. So super of authorities, username, signature, and then authentication true. We can delete this one. Okay, fine. So we can just pass in three things: username, and then signature, and then the role. That's it. This could be our token. We need to test whether it works first of all. Okay, so Control Shift O, save it. Now let's try to create this token in our HMAC filter. So let's do this. Super, it understood because we came from there. It filled up username, then signature, and user role. Okay. For now, we will not make any changes into what passes as the input because we want to test whether it works properly or not. So let's incrementally make changes in the system. Because right now we don't know whether this token will work also or not. We just tried to make our best guess, created some role, username, signature, blah, blah, blah. Let's try to check it out. Everything is saved. There is no compilation problem. There is no service startup problem. You call it and here it goes. It's working. Custom token support is there. It is working very good. So we are able to create our own custom token. You taking some references from ChatGPT, looking at the other existing token of the system, and this is how we have to make our decisions. Okay, what is more good, easy to code, easy to write, and this sounds good, right? Just string roles you provide, and it is going to take care. Okay, fine. Now, what? Let me paste this object also for your reference in Notepad. Okay, let me paste this object. Or in fact, in the document which I'm going to share with you, we can add this token there itself somewhere. HMAC authentication token. Just look here. I can just replace a custom token like this. Okay. And then when you are trying to call it, let me even give that invoker code as well of how you use it. So this is how we are using it. So I will paste reference here also. Okay, this is how we are using it. Okay, fine. Next, we need to use the correct values. We need to use the correct values now. Username, signature, and role. So somehow signature we have to read from the header. Okay, what is the username? देखो, all requests coming to our system is coming from the merchant. Okay, so we can say currently role is merchant. We are not writing any business logic here, but we can say role is merchant role because merchant is accessing our system. In future, when we want to write something, we can use this merchant roles. So role, we will define it as merchant role. Signature, we will take it from the input header. But what is the username? It's like which user you are trying to validate. So think about it here, guys. A bit tricky, but try to understand. Currently, we are building this validation service and our merchant is calling us. Okay. Let's say in future, we get another merchant, more than one merchant if it comes. Currently, we don't have it. But if one more merchant comes inside in future, this guy is also going to try to call you. So all the requests coming from this merchant, the username should be somehow identified by this merchant. Nothing but every merchant will be given something called as merchant ID. Here also something it will be having merchant ID. That becomes the username for this one. Nothing but identity of who is making this API call. So somehow we need to know who has made it. It is merchant ID 1, and that is what is supposed to happen in the username field. Currently, since we don't have multiple merchants, we can simply provide a constant value here. Okay, private static final string merchant ID. Okay, let's say merchant 1001. We will give some merchant ID and we will just use that itself. It's because it is constant value. Merchant underscore ID. So we can simply go here and that will become our username. Since we have only one, we are hard coding, but you need to understand if it becomes more than one in future, we need one easy way to implement it. In header, they should pass this merchant ID. Every merchant will be given a unique ID. In header, you pass this ID and then you have to read the header value and from there you can know the username. So let's make a note of this. Currently, okay, what should be the username? User name of our token. We are saying unique ID of merchant who is calling our system. Currently, we have only one merchant. So we can just use hard coded value or constant value. In future, when more merchants want to integrate to our service, then we need to have dynamic merchant ID logic. Accordingly, that will become username. The secrets are also merchant specific. Currently, from the property file we are picking, but every merchant will have a separate secret. So when multiple merchants are accessing, we have to make changes into the system. Maybe in the database, you need to save all the secrets. This merchant ID and secret will be there in the database. Header mein, invoker is going to pass the merchant ID. Then you need to go to the database, get the secret, then verify HMAC with regards to that, and then make a decision whether to go forward or not. That much business logic will change when multiple merchant support needs to happen. But currently, since it is only one, we don't have to get into all this complexity. Guys, are you getting it? Are you getting it, team? Currently, there is only one merchant, so ID is fixed, secret key is fixed, HMAC secret key. But multiple merchants, if you get, you have to make dynamic decision. Okay, this merchant ID is what is his secret, other merchant is what. So when you are building production systems, your use cases will go all these ways. Or currently this is there, so we are building like this. If this happens, system mein we have to correct the rest of the things accordingly. So if the product says, if we will ask the product owner, if he says ki within next 6 months, more merchants might come to the system. So then we have to already design it in that manner. Future mein we don't have to make changes. But if the product owner says, right now there is no requirement like this, we don't know. Currently with only one merchant we are planning to do business. Maybe in future we might get, but right now we cannot say. In that case, you can do like this. Maybe after 1 year, you implement whenever need comes. Okay? So it is fine. This is called as don't over-engineer. So sometimes people just make the system so much optimized, which is not even required. So unnecessary complexity is added where you don't even need it. So you need to think about future, but decently, not like very much high pace over engineering. So again, right balance has to be striked here. But anyways, let's continue. We made some decisions. The merchant is going to be the username. Okay, signature, we need to read it from the signature field itself. So what are we going to pass? Let's try to get the signature here. Okay, so HMAC has to be anyways extracted from here. Where is our signature? Yesterday we were playing around. So